Southwest 3216 only tired, runway 24 right for land.
Hi everyone, welcome to the CAT-07 rating. This is the 7th flight in the VFR Communication and Airspace Training Series on the PilotEdge network. Today we will be flying from San Bernardino Airport out to El Monte Airport. It's just another Class Delta to Class Delta flight, similar to several of the other ratings we've done in the past, but there is a kicker. We are adding a Class Charlie transition into all this. So what that means is that we're going to have to figure out exactly what we need to do to transition to Charlie, and we're going to have to determine who to call, when to call, and how that all transpires. As with all videos, make sure you read the textual portion of the CAT-07 flight here on this page in front of you before you actually watch the video. That way you'll just be a little bit better briefed as you watch the video and things will make a little more sense to you. Let's head over to skyvector.com, and I've already got the flight drawn out here from San Bernardino, that's Sierra Bravo Delta, out to El Monte, Echo Mike Tango. It's only a 40-mile flight today, so it's going to be pretty short, and I'm in the Barren, which means it's going to go quite quickly. So we need to make sure that we are fully briefed before we leave the ground, because as you'll see on departure, that's really going to be the trickiest part, is about 3 to 4 minutes from the time our wheels leave the ground to the time that we hit the Class Charlie airspace, and we need to make sure that we are fully prepared for that. So first, let's start by talking about what the Charlie is. The Class Charlie surrounds Ontario Airport. This is Ontario, California. You'll see the Class Charlie airspace defined by this magenta line that goes around it. You see the inner area here that surrounds the airport, and then every Class Charlie has an outer area as well, and that's what you're seeing around here. Check out the link in the top right of the video. That'll bring you to the PilotEdge workshop video where you can learn all about airspace, not only Class Charlies, but also Deltas, Bravos, and special use airspace. It's going to be really important that you understand what airspace is and how to operate in it before you perform these flights going forward, because we're also going to be getting into Class Bravos as we move further down the ratings. So the main thing with a Class Charlie as far as operating in it, it's somewhat like a Class Delta where you need to establish two-way radio communications with the controlling entity. In this case, it's going to be SoCal Approach Control, which is the overlying approach controller. Additionally to that, the difference between a Delta and a Charlie is that with a Charlie, you need to have an operating mode C transponder. Thankfully, in the sim, most airplanes have that. If you're in X-plane, that's just going to be turning your transponder to that mode C or altitude mode that we already talked about before we taxi out for a flight. If you're in Lockheed Martin's prepared Flight Sim 2020 or Flight Simulator X, just make sure you select that Mode C button on the connection client. That will effectively turn your transponder on, and then you will be able to be seen by air traffic control, and you'll be in the Mode C altitude reporting position. So at this point, let's brief our departure, and let's figure out how this transition is actually going to work and what we're going to do when we get off the ground. So we're going to talk about it both from a runway 6 and a runway 24 perspective, because I haven't picked up the ATIS yet. I don't quite know which runway they're using, but it might be different when you fly your flight, so we'll prepare for both. I think it's important to start off by just looking at all the different airspace that's around us at San Bernardino. So first off, the San Bernardino Class Delta. It kind of looks like a baseball field. It goes up to and including 3,200 feet. Now, as we move out to the west, obviously we have the Ontario Class Charlie, denoted by the magenta line here. It's got an inner ring, which goes from the surface, because it's the airport, up to 5,000 feet MSL. And then the outer ring, which is 2,700 feet MSL, that's the floor, up to the ceiling of 5,000 MSL. Just south of that, you have the Riverside Class Delta airspace that is up to and not including 2,700 feet. You see that little minus sign next to the 27. That means up to and not including 2,700 feet, because right here, 2,700 feet is the Class Charlie. So it can't be owned by two different airspaces. Over off to the west, you have Chino's Class Delta, also up to and not including 2,700 feet for the same reason as Riverside. Out further to the west of Ontario, you have Brackett Airport, Brackett's Class Delta airspace, up to and not including 2,700 feet for the same reasons as before. And finally, just due south of San Bernardino Airport, you'll see another Class Charlie airspace. This is March Air Reserve Base. March is a joint use airport, but mainly military. It is a Class Charlie. This inner ring is the surface up to 5,500 feet MSL, with the outer ring not really affecting us today, but it's in the southeastern quadrant here, 5,500 feet down to 3,900 feet MSL. It's even got this little sliver here of 55 down to 2,900 feet MSL. So those are the airspaces that we're going to be working with today. And remember, the whole purpose of this rating is to transition the Ontario Class Charlie. Now, why that's important is because it'd be quite simple just to depart San Bernardino, head out to the east, climb up to 6,500, then head westbound, get over the Charlie, and then descend and land at El Monte. However, that really defeats the entire purpose of the rating, and you're not going to get credit for the CAT-07 unless you actually transition the Ontario Class Charlie airspace. So we're not going to do that today. We're not going to just overfly it. We're actually going through it.
Come on, we're going to swim over this thing.
Whoa, whoa, partner. Little red flag going up. Something's telling me we should swim through it, not over it.
Along those same lines, you could likely depart out to the north. Now, there is some high terrain up here, but there is room to skirt the north side of the Charlie and the mountains, and you could just skirt all the way over here at, say, 3,000, 2,500, and just skirt all that airspace to the north and get over to El Monte. Again, that defeats the purpose of the CAT-07. So we're not going to do either of those things today. Now, instead of actually briefing the different methods of getting out of San Bernardino, I'll just kind of give you the overall idea. And the overall idea is that you need to somehow get from San Bernardino over to the Class Charlie with enough time to allow you to contact the overlying approach controller, which is going to be SoCal approach, and get those two-way radio communications to allow you to enter the Class Charlie airspace. Remember that the two-way radio communications is our ticket into the Class Charlie airspace, just like it is the Delta, except with the Charlie, we need that Mode C transponder and the two-way radio communications. So once the controller says our call sign, as long as they don't say anything like remain outside of the airspace, then we can enter the airspace. So whether that means that you depart east, make a few 360s to gain some altitude, maybe climb to 4,500, and then start tracking back westbound to contact SoCal and get that transition, or maybe you depart south, make some left 360s, and get above the Class Delta airspace of San Bernardino, and then call SoCal. Or you could even depart west, stay beneath the Class Charlie, stay below 2,700 feet, and then try and get that two-way radio communication with SoCal approach to enter the Class Charlie. In that case, you can climb up and into it. Whichever way you choose, just be aware of the airspace around you. For instance, that last method I just referenced, the staying low method under the shelf, you just need to make sure you don't trek so far west that you hit the inner circle, which is 5,000 down to the surface, or trek to the southwest and clip the Riverside Class Delta airspace. So be aware of that. Be aware of your surroundings. Additionally, if you choose to depart south or depart east, you need to make sure that you are clear of the Class Delta airspace of San Bernardino before you switch frequencies over to SoCal, or before you start making a bunch of 360s. You don't want to just be cleared for, say, a left down departure out of San Bernardino off runway 24 because you're planning to head out to the east to make a few 360s to gain altitude before heading west, and then you get maybe crosswind to downwind on that departure, and then you just start turning back over the airport and you're only through, say, 2,700 feet. At that point, you're still well in this Class Delta airspace, and you don't want to do anything without permission from the tower. Now, with all that in mind, a very helpful tool you can use here is what's known as an early frequency change. You can request an early frequency change from San Bernardino Tower, and that would just sound something like Tower Baron 0 Pop Echo, request early frequency change. That's all you need to say. You don't have to tell them where you're going. You don't have to tell them why. All it is a request to leave the frequency before leaving the actual airspace. We learned in the CAT-4, you need to remain on the Class Delta Tower's frequency until you are clear of the Delta airspace. Well, that still holds true unless you get approval for an early frequency change. So to put that in perspective for you, let's say we're departing out to the east. We depart out from runway 24, make a left down departure, and we're just right about here at midfield. We're climbing through, let's just say 2,200. So we still have 1,000 feet vertically to go in the airspace and maybe another 2 to 3 miles out to the east. We say San Bernardino Tower, Baron 0 Pop Echo, request early frequency change. They say Baron 0 Pop Echo, frequency change approved. At that point, we are permitted to leave their frequency despite still being in the Class Delta airspace because they approved it. However, as a courtesy, don't go making 360s and don't go certainly descending. Essentially, they were nice enough to give you that early frequency change, so please continue to leave the Class Delta. Don't do anything that's unexpected. For all you know, there might be a departure right behind you, and you don't want to make a 180 right back into that departure because you're still in that Class Delta airspace. Now, once you get above 3,200, or once you get outside the lateral limits of the Delta, it's completely up to you what you want to do. You can maneuver, you can climb, whatever you want to do. But as far as leaving the Delta, just continue on what the tower's expecting you to do. A standard climb, and maybe keep that present heading at least until you leave the Delta airspace, whether it's vertically or laterally. And that goes for whether you're going out to the west, the south, the east, wherever you want to exit the Delta airspace. But that early frequency change can be incredibly useful because your ticket here is, like we said, that two-way radio communications with SoCal approach. That is your ticket into the Class Charlie. So you want to get over to SoCal as quickly as possible because you don't have a whole lot of time here. Now it's going to help if you go out to the east or the south and you're kind of making it some 360s, but ideally you still want to get over to approach and through the Charlie as quickly as possible, just so you can be an efficient pilot. So now let's talk about what's going to happen when we get airborne. So let's assume we get that early frequency change, regardless of our direction of departure. Today we are going to go out to the west though. We're going to use that stay low method, stay below 2,700 feet. And then once we establish those two-way radio communications with SoCal approach, we'll just pop our way up vertically up to 4,500 feet and plan a transition at that altitude through the Charlie. So we will request an early frequency change, at least we'll plan on it when we get airborne. And regardless if we're off 6 or 2-4, it won't matter. Hopefully we'll get approval from the tower to switch frequencies. And now we need to contact SoCal approach. Now how do we know the frequency? Tower's not going to tell us. We're not getting flight following like we did in the CAT-06 rating, so they're not going to just tell us to contact departure. So we need to find the frequency on our own. Well, if you look at the sectional here, you'll see these three boxes. Contact SoCal approach within 20 nautical miles on 125.5. This one says 127.0. This one says 134.0. The bigger numbers that starts with 3s and 2s are all UHF frequencies. Don't worry about those. Those are used by military aircraft. The VHF frequencies are what you have, and those all start with 1s. So we can really use any of these boxes. It really doesn't matter a whole lot, but ideally we want to try and use the box that is closest to our route of flight because that's going to give us the best chance of talking to the appropriate air traffic controller. So that would be this box here on 127.0. If we were to say contact them on 134.0 like this box says, the controller would likely just tell us to contact this guy anyways. So we'll at least try and get as close as we can. It's not a foolproof system. You're not always going to get the right frequency, but you can do your best. So at that point, we're going to call up. We'll tell them our standard who we're calling, who we are, where we are, what we want to do. We want to transition the Class Charlie airspace over to El Monte. They will give us a squawk code, which is a beacon code. We just type that in for our transponder. And then they will give us an altimeter, and they will have set our call sign at that point because they have to in order to give us a squawk code or any sort of response on the radio. And as long as they don't tell us to remain outside the Ontario Charlie, then we will be okay to pop up right into 2,700 feet and climb up to 4,500 feet while we're underneath this shelf, or even bust right through the inner circle. They're not necessarily going to say anything like transition approved. They're certainly not going to say that we're cleared into the Class Charlie. There's no such thing as a Class Charlie clearance. It's just going to be that two-way radio communication with the overlying controller. So we are going to establish that. And at that point, they'll likely just tell us radar contact. We've heard that before. They'll give us a local altimeter. And that'll be about it. At that point, we know we can truck right through the Class Charlie. Now, they might also give us some sort of restriction. They might say maintain at or above 3,500 or maintain remain north of the Ontario airport. That could be another restriction. So they might give us a restriction in order to control us a little bit within the Class Charlie. So just be ready for that, but also be ready for no restriction. It could go either way depending on the traffic at that time. Remember, everything is dynamic. So we'll trek right over Ontario, and we're planning to do this at 4,500 feet. We will pass the Cable Airport. We will fly right overhead the Brackett Airport. And then at some point, we will either request a frequency change or they will tell us that we can change over to El Monte Tower. That's another thing we're going to tell them when we depart, is that we're going to be transitioning Ontario airspace, landing El Monte, or heading over to El Monte. This isn't necessarily flight following. It's going to be very similar in the exact really same phraseology and everything, but we're really just kind of picking up radar service for the Class Charlie transition. And if you want to call it flight following, you can. Just know that it's really the same thing procedurally. It's just that we're not necessarily looking for flight following. That's why we're not requesting it off the ground. It would just more so be we are calling up ATC for the Class Charlie transition. And then finally, as we get over to El Monte, we'll be clear of all Class Charlie airspace. We'll want to make sure that we don't clip the Brackett Delta in our descent, but I don't anticipate that being a problem. And then we will expect likely just left traffic for runway 19 or right traffic for runway 1. It'll be one of those most likely as we get over to El Monte. But the biggest key to remember in this entire departure is to not bust any airspace of the controller that you're not already in contact with, and make sure you remain clear of all airspace while you're maneuvering to get up to altitude. Once again, I would recommend 4,500 feet for this transition. It's a westbound flight, so it would suit you well to be an even altitude plus 500 feet, i.e. 4,500, and then that'll take you right through the Charlie, and you'll be well on your way to completing the CAT-07 rating. Okay, so let's do some real quick cockpit setup. This is going to be abbreviated. Again, if you're looking for more of the cockpit setup, we've gone through it a lot in the prior CAT ratings, but for the sake of time in this rating, I'm just going to kind of breeze through this. I won't necessarily explain everything like I do in the other ratings. I'm going to get the ATIS on my own. I'll report back with the weather and the active runway, and then we'll go from there. Okay, I've completed my cockpit setup. I've got 121.8 in the active. I've got tower 1945 in the standby for my comms, so we're good there. I've got the ATIS, that's information Juliet, and they are departing runway 24. We're going to go back in right now and just quickly rebrief runway 24 since that's what we're going to be getting. So off runway 24, that's right to left here. We're going to come off, and we're going to keep it low. So we're going to keep it about 2,500 or so, no higher than 2,600. We're going to keep it 2,500 or below is our goal. We'll ask for that early frequency change, and that way we can contact SoCal, and then we'll get up and over at 4,500. So that's our goal here. We're going to keep it in a slower climb so we buy ourselves some time off runway 24. As far as our taxi plan goes today, we're over here at the GA hangars, and here's runway 24, so it should be a nice, easy taxi out. We can expect taxiway Alpha out to the runway. Back to the cockpit we go, and we're going to call ground for taxi. I'm on the ground, Baron 210 Pop Echo at the GA hangars on the east side of the field. Ready to taxi for a westbound departure with information Juliet. This is for the CAT-07 rating.
210 Papa Echo, San Bernardino bound, runway 24, taxi via Alpha. And I missed, were you looking for flight following?
Runway 24, taxi via Alpha, and negative, just a westbound departure, 0 Pop Echo. Now, interestingly enough that she asked if we were looking for flight following, now I am going to point out in the rating that the rating specifically says not to get flight following from the ground. And again, I mentioned try to remain in the spirit of the rating, and that is why. It's just, it would make it a lot easier if you get flight following off the ground, because you'd already have the frequency, approach would know you're coming, and it would just make it a lot easier rating. So you got to pick up your radar service in the air. We are approaching the runway now, and you'll see on the right side I do have the GPS up, direct El Monte, so I'm using GPS navigation again today. Haven't used that in several of the flights, so I figured I'd get that back up there. It'll just help a little bit for our situational awareness and help us get on our way. Again, like every CAT rating, the navigation is completely up to you. If you'd like to use VORs, GPS, dead reckoning, however you'd like to do it is perfectly fine. I'm just choosing to use GPS today to give you a little bit of variety throughout the ratings on your options of what you can use. San Bernardino Tower, Baron 210 Papa Echo, holding short runway 24 for west departure.
210 Papa Echo, San Bernardino Tower, runway 24, clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff, runway 24, Baron 0 Papa Echo. Now, real quick while we're on the roll, we're going to get our departure frequency, which again was just, all we did was pick it up off of the chart in this box. So 127.0 right here is what we're going to be using. So I'm going to put that in my standby, and ideally you would do this while you're still holding short of the runway. So try and get that done earlier than I am. 127.0, that way it's just a real short click over when we're airborne. We don't want to be dealing with trying to fiddle in and put that in while we are on upwind when we don't have much time to contact them.
Clearance. On departure fly runway heading, maintain VFR at or below 1,500
Gear up.
kilobytes. Departure frequency 120.55.
We're going to start pulling the power back now for that slower climb. And once we can get a word in on the frequency, we're going to ask for that early frequency change so we can head over to SoCal. San Bernardino Tower, November 0 Pop Echo, request early frequency change over to SoCal.
0 Pop Echo, frequency change approved.
Thanks so much, 0 Pop Echo. Okay, so we are going to swap over to SoCal.
It looked like it appeared that you did that.
And we're going to keep that slow climb going.
Turn north and exit Bravo airspace.
Turning north, leading Bravo airspace, November 7 for Papa Whiskey.
This is the example of how ATC can also be really busy and you can't get a word in quite yet. So we need to make sure that we are delaying enough so we don't penetrate that airspace. Now we're at 2600 now. and we're going to level off there. That way there's no way we can hit the Charlie, at least yet. Remember, if we go on this heading for too long, we're going to end up hitting that inner Charlie. So we'll level off here at 2,500 feet now. You can actually see Ontario Airport right off the nose. You can see the approach lights, and hopefully we get two-way radio communication well before that. SoCal approach, Baron 210 Pop Echo is just off of San Bernardino Airport, 2,500. Request transition through Ontario Charlie Airspace landing El Monte.
210 Pop Echo, SoCal approach squawk 4324 Ident.
4324 Ident, 0 Pop Echo. 4324, and if you're in X-plane, you would just hit the Ident button. I'm in Flight Simulator 2020, so I need to hit the Ident button on the client. And I've done that now. And he has set our call sign, so we are okay to enter the airspace, so I can begin that climb. 2906, Baron 0 Pop Echo. And we'll be 4,500, Baron 0 Pop Echo. Alright, 2906 is in, and we have established that two-way radio communication. We can climb up to 4,500. It was really just a courtesy of me to tell him which altitude we were going to be cruising at. If he really cared, he would have told us. In the briefing, we discussed a little bit on the restrictions we could potentially expect. He didn't give us any, so that makes it easy. Now, we do need to make sure we remain clear of clouds, and this overcast layer is a little bit lower than I expected. So we're going to start kind of aiming away from that a little bit before we begin that climb. As you can see, these clouds out here, we wouldn't really be able to climb much higher than we're at now, which is 3,000 feet. And you always need to maintain those cloud clearances, as we are still VFR, despite us in the Charlie airspace. That does not take away our normal cloud clearance requirements. All right, looks like the clouds are north of us now, so we're going to begin our climb up to 4,500. And because we told SoCal we'd be at 4,500, if we were to have to keep it lower than that due to clouds, I would certainly let them know, because they're going to be expecting us to go up to 4,500. For that little portion there, we had to zigzag to the south slightly. It wasn't really a big deal because we were still in a climb. We didn't have to drop down below the clouds. But if you do end up changing anything that you already told the controller, make sure you let them know. Now, it's actually a really good example here on the GPS of the Class Charlie. You can see the inner ring here, and you can even see the outer ring. But we are approaching the inner ring here, the inner circle. Remember, I'm not a real-world Baron pilot, as I say in most, if not all, my videos. I'm not even a real-world twin pilot, so take the flying of the aircraft with a grain of salt. My job here today is to show you how to navigate a Class Charlie airspace, how to fly the CAT-07 rating from an airspace and communications perspective. So as we look ahead, the next things we're going to be doing are getting the ATIS for El Monte, and then eventually getting a frequency change and landing at El Monte. Now, I'm in Flight Simulator 2020, and at this current time, they have not made it possible to monitor COM1 and COM2 simultaneously. Therefore, I'm going to have to either request a frequency change to get the ATIS, or I will just wait until we get closer to El Monte. You can choose either one of those. Considering we are smack dab, well, not quite, but considering we're going to be smack dab over the middle of Ontario Airport, I am going to not request that frequency change, especially because, again, these clouds are getting a little bit in our way. We might have to drop back down. So I don't want to get tied up on another frequency and all of a sudden a cloud buildup pops up right in front of us, and we're not on frequency to let the controller know that we're going to be descending. So things are looking a little clear now. So we'll see what happens. But for now, we are not going to get the ATIS quite yet. Just know that that is a step that you should be thinking about. However, I will tune the ATIS, and that is on 118.75. I'll show you all the chart here I'm looking at. So the El Monte Airport, this is it here, just one single runway, 19er and 1. Frequencies up here, 118.75 for the ATIS. And we will be parking at the base of the tower here. So if we get runway 19er, probably a Delta exit. This is a displaced threshold here. Bakersfield had one of these as well, so we talked about a little bit as we flew the CAT rating in there. But that's what this signifies, is a displaced threshold, so we won't be able to land till there, so there's no way we'll catch Charlie. And hopefully we'll be able to hit Delta. It's got a little bit of a high-speed angle there, so we should be able to angle off quite nicely. And if we get runway 1, maybe we can hit Delta as well. If not, we'll hit Charlie. Another small displaced threshold there. You can see by the symbol there. Back into the cockpit, making sure we're remaining clear of clouds. Ontario Airport is just beneath us. You can see it. I'll dip the wings slightly. There it is. You can see the 2 parallel runways of Ontario and some significant buildups off our right. We're going to aim away from those slightly here. Now keep in mind, if you are VFR, the cloud clearances and your VFR clearances are always the priority. You need to always maintain VFR. If, let's say, ATC had told us to maintain an altitude or a heading that did not allow us to maintain VFR, you need to let them know immediately, because just because they have you on a heading does not mean that you are to fly through a cloud. That is how accidents happen very, very quickly and very, very easily if you are not an instrument rated pilot, or if you're just not set up to fly instruments, or if you're just VFR. It's not legal to fly through a cloud. Now, because we can't get the ATIS right now, I'm actually going to use another feature PilotEdge offers, and that's simply pilotedge.net/ATIS. So you can go to pilotedge.net/ATIS and actually pick up the ATIS from there. And it's a little bit of a workaround when Flight Simulator 2020 doesn't allow us to pick it up right now. So I'll show you all that process. This is pilotedge.net/ATIS. You can just go to quick ATIS lookup, type in El Monte and submit, and there you go. El Monte Airport, information kilo. So we'll write that down. Information kilo is what we have. And we'll it's the altimeter is 2903, wind 20010, visibility 5, smoke clear, landing and departing runway 19er. So that's all we need to know. We have information kilo. And approach 0 Pop Echo. Going to begin a VFR descent to maintain VFR.
0 Pop Echo, run.
All right, we're going to start down a little bit here as the this might be smoke or maybe just a small overcast layer getting in our way a little bit.
210 Papa Echo, contact El Monte Tower, 121.2, squawk VFR.
121.2 squawk VFR, thanks a lot, 0 Pop Echo. Okay, and as we discussed in the CAT-06 video, I should have used Baron 0 Pop Echo. I can't just say 0 Pop Echo, but we'll try and do better next time. Okay, we are on a VFR code now, 1200, and I'm behind the airplane because I don't have the tower frequency ready, since I still had the ATIS ready in there. So we're going to pull that up on 121.2. So 121.2 is going in the COM 1. El Monte Tower, Baron 210 Pop Echo is just southwest of Bracket, 2,600 to land with kilo.
210 Pop Echo, El Monte Tower, report 3 mile left base, runway 19.
Report 3 mile left base, runway 19er, Baron 0 Pop Echo. Now I want to point out something interesting that happened here because of our requirement to maintain VFR. You'll notice we are actually inside of Bracket's Class Delta airspace. We're inside this little circle here for Bracket, KPOC. And if we look over here, below 2,700 is what they own. So we were at 2,600 there for a moment because we had to descend. Now, this is why it's important to tell SoCal that you're descending. We discussed this a little bit in the last video, and I'll put a link at the top right to a coordination video and talking about transitioning Class Delta airspace while you're receiving radar service. And ideally, the controller should coordinate that transition with Bracket Tower for us. And that's all the more reason why it's important to let them know that we are dropping down to a lower altitude, because we were going to clip Bracket's airspace. That's not to say that had we not reported that they wouldn't have coordinated it for us, but it's just a little bit of a hint for them to do that coordination on our behalf. Now, there's conflicting information out there. You'll see in the video what I mean by that if you click it in the top right. But just know that the coordination likely happened on the back end. However, it would not have hurt for me to verify that we were okay to dip down into Bracket's airspace. I could have just told SoCal, hey, we need to keep descending to maintain VFR, verify that we can clip Bracket's Delta, or something like that. Sometimes just saying complete simple English is the best way to go. Okay, so our pattern entry is a 3 mile left base. So she told us to report a 3 mile left base, which essentially just implies make 3 mile or enter 3 mile left base, runway 19er. That means we need to be 3 miles out on the left base for runway 19er. And we'll bring up the chart real quick so I can show you that in graphical context. So we are right around here, and we're going to be going about 3 miles north of the airport for a left base in the runway 19er. Remember, left turns, left base in the runway 19er. So we will plan for taxiway Delta on the exit, and we'll get ground ready on 125.9er, and that's it for the charts. Okay, I've got 125.9er set. That's on my standby, so I'm ready to call ground whenever we get on the ground here. It's important to remember your reporting points whenever you are instructed to report anything. Report midfield down, report a 3-mile left base in this case. You never want to forget. It's easy for new pilots to get so caught up in the flying and making sure they're doing things right, they completely forget the report. And realistically, the report is so important because the controller is relying on that report to know that you are where they want you to be or where they think you are. So you need to make sure A, your report is accurate, and B, you actually make the report. We're going to start dropping some flaps here, and I'm going to get the gear down. And we've got El Monte Airport off to our left, just beyond the engine there. Alright, we are established on a base leg now, so I will let her know that we are on the base whenever we can get a word in. El Monte Tower, bearing 0 Pop Echo, 3-mile left base, runway 19er.
There's 0 Pop Echo, thank you, runway 19er, clear to land.
Clear to land, runway 19er, bearing 0 Pop Echo. Bounced it slightly. We also floated, so I think there goes taxiway Delta, I believe that was. Yeah, we make sure we clear those hold bars. Now this airport presents an interesting situation because the hold bars make it so we can't really just stop without encroaching on taxiway Alpha, which is right here. So the way that the aim reads is that you need to completely clear the hold bars. It doesn't matter if that takes you onto another taxiway. The primary goal is to clear the hold bars. So ground and tower control should take into account that you might end up encroaching on one of these other taxiways just because you have to clear those hold bars unless you have a specific instruction to exit the runway and hold short of another taxiway. In that case, you can stop short of the taxiway and stay inside of the hold bars. And now that we're clear of the runway, we will clean up the airplane and request taxi over to the ramp. El Monte Tower, bearing 0 Pop Echoes, clear the runway, request taxi to the base of the tower.
Oh, there's 0 Pop Echo, I think we blocked each other there. Taxi to parking via Alpha, monitor ground, and it's past to the CAT-07.
Taxi via Alpha, thanks for the pass, we'll monitor ground, bearing 0 Pop Echo. Alright, another passed CAT rating. Clear right and clear left. We'll monitor ground. Just switch over to 125.9er for ground, and we will monitor them just in case they need to get us get a hold of us. Thanks for joining us for the CAT-07. Best of luck on your CAT-07 attempt. We'll see you for the CAT-8, where we will depart and arrive at a Class Charlie airspace. Take care.